I remember graduating from university after 3 years of assignments, lectures and exams, really looking forward to finally becoming a full-fledged adult, getting a job, earning my first paycheck. The things that I imagined I would do with my money. I'd take my parents out for dinner. I'd go on a shopping spree, maybe buy a new handphone. Now imagine my shock when I discovered that after all the deductions, I didn't have much left. My starting salary as a fresh graduate in the communications industry was 1,500 ringgit. Yes, that was many years ago, and to be fair, we have increased the minimum wage by 25% since the beginning of the year, but it still begs the question, are Malaysians paid enough? Hi, I'm Aishah Sinclair, and this is Togetherness. According to a Bank Negara report in 2018, a single person would need at least 2,700 ringgit per month, and similarly, a couple with 2 children will require 6,500 to survive in Kuala Lumpur. And this calculation is based on 2017 estimates. Similarly, an article that came out in 2021 by the Malaysian Reserve said that an average cost of living for a single person staying in Kuala Lumpur is 3,300 ringgit, which is way higher than the minimum wage of 1,500 ringgit. Not only that, an annual survey by the Ministry of Higher Education showed that a minimum of 10% of fresh graduates with degrees earn between 1,000 ringgit to 1,005 ringgit, and that hasn't changed much in the past 10 years. But bear in mind, under the National Wages Consultative Council Act 2011, the minimum wage must be reviewed every 2 years. Doesn't sound like that has been the case. On top of that, Malaysians in droves have taken to social media to complain about their stagnant salary and the rising cost of living. The Instagram page Malaysian Pay Gap, which sees Malaysians discussing their salary openly and transparently, has amassed close to 200,000 followers. So, we have all of this evidence and research and numbers before us. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I know we're often told to bersyukur when we complain, that at least we have a job, that at least you have an income stream. But surely there is a difference between tak bersyukur, which is being ungrateful, and simply asking that our time and labor is being compensated fairly. Because let's be real, a positive attitude alone is not going to pay the bills, and being told to bersyukur has kept us quiet all this while. Now, it's time to do some budgeting. Imagine a fresh graduate who moved to KL for better job prospects, earning around 1,500 ringgit. The 2 biggest things they may have to pay for are their monthly car loan payments and rent. Now, let's deduct petrol, groceries, and other miscellaneous expenses, and there's not much left. Actually, there's nothing left. Negative. In fact, you're in debt, and we haven't even put aside anything for savings or put aside money for leisure. Looking at that, I'm sure you can decide for yourself. Is it enough to meet the minimum acceptable standard of living, allowing fresh grads not only to meet their basic needs, but also their social and emotional well-being too? So, there are no surprises that recent studies have shown that over 70% of school leavers do not wish to further their education or go on to university. Now, in many industries, the pay that you make in gig economy can be a lot higher, especially in the entry level. So they may be asking, what's the point, right? Perhaps this is why we should consider the living wage instead of a blanket minimum wage. Now, what is the living wage, you asked? Living wage is a wage rate that is high enough for the average worker to maintain an adequate standard of living and an appropriate or respectable lifestyle. This includes the ability to participate in society, the opportunity for personal and family development, the freedom from severe financial stress, Now, there are calls for think tanks and employee movements to use the living wage concept for fairer compensation, including Malaysian economists who are of the view that the average living wage for a Malaysian should be in the region of 2,005 to 2,900 ringgit a month to accurately reflect the rising cost of living. So let's dive deeper into this issue. A 2022 news report states that Malaysian employers are considered stingy compared to regional neighbours, as they only contribute 25% of the country's gross domestic product as wages to workers, as opposed to Singapore, which contributes about 40%, Indonesia 84%, and the Philippines 76%. Let's also make a comparison between the average salaries of professions in Malaysia compared to the United States. A teacher in a public school here in Malaysia makes an average of about 3,500 ringgit a month. And in the US, depending on the state, they can make an average of $5,600 a month. Now, for engineers with roughly about 1 to 2 years experience, in Malaysia, they're expected to bring in about 2,500 to 3,500 ringgit per month. Now, an electrical engineer with the same amount of experience in the US could bring home roughly $6,900 per month. Now, ignoring the currency conversion and acknowledging that these are rough estimates, but you do see a pattern growing here, don't you? If compared to other countries, Malaysians are paid under the global market rate for salaries within the same educational and experience level. Now, let's take a look at this ad in Singapore that went viral, and let's compare it to something closer to home. The salary of the same position is way higher, even before the conversion rate. And of course, I know some of you may say, "Alah, the cost of living there is higher." We have been hiding behind this excuse for far too long. The cost of living here in Malaysia is high too. And the salary is often nearly not enough. So let's skip the excuses and ask the real question instead. Why aren't we paying people fairly for their labor and skills? So it's no surprise that the Malaysian workforce is unhappy. In fact, Malaysians are found to be the unhappiest bunch in Southeast Asia, according to a survey by Hayes. Almost half of the Malaysians who were surveyed stated that they were dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the amount that they were getting paid. Salary dissatisfaction is not just something we complain about. There are consequences to productivity, efficiency, and overall economy. Now, in fact, I'm sure that us Malaysians are too familiar with the problem of the brain drain. Every year, we lose more and more talents to the lure of a much higher salary and benefits. In fact, we have lost 500,000 skilled professionals who left in search of a better life. And Malaysian workers cite better salary and career prospects as being the main reason for working overseas. Not only that, according to a report by World Bank, 2 out of 10 Malaysians with university-level education choose to advance their careers in another country. And for the same reason, less attractive salary and benefits offered in Malaysia compared to other countries. Well, if they don't want to stay, fine. Good riddance lah kan? No, guys. Malaysia loses out when it loses its best talents, who could be starting businesses here, developing new technologies on Malaysian ground, and becoming specialists in their field, but here in Malaysia. It's hard for the country to strive for high growth and productivity when we need all hands on deck to drive this country forward. And it's even more unfortunate that when our friends decide to leave because of push factors within the country, that is left unaddressed. Over time, Malaysia loses its competitive intellectual and industrial edge. Now, think of all those names of Malaysians that we've heard who are doing amazing things and breaking barriers abroad. Olympians, entrepreneurs, scientists, politicians. They could all be doing that here in Malaysia. So what can we do about it? Let's look inwardly first. What we can do on an individual level is increase our skill set. Jobs that require higher skills tend to offer a higher income. So instead of waiting for that salary increment to come, we could take a positive action towards adding to the value that we bring as employees. But the much bigger issue is this. On an organizational level, companies could work on removing the stigma of not talking about salary among employees. It's heartening to see Malaysians openly discussing their salaries on social media, prompting others in the same field to gauge theirs. This could encourage salary transparency, which, yes, has its pros and cons, but if employees are able to compare, they might realize they're being paid market rate and spend a lot less time being dissatisfied. But more importantly, they can also negotiate for more or increase the value that they bring to the firm by leveling up. A dissatisfied workforce is an unproductive workforce. On top of that, policymakers and employers should be earnest in their evaluation of what's fair compensation. Being in denial and refusing to acknowledge the loud blaring sirens from economists, think tanks, and even employees themselves is just further exacerbating the problem. Perhaps have a wage review every 2 years to assess the rising costs of living and inflation. The bottom line is we need to have more conversations like the one we're having right now, to hopefully ensure equal and fair pay to those who deserve it and keep our talented workforce here in Malaysia. Because in the end of the day, it's Malaysia and Malaysians who lose out due to non-competitive average wages.